Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is Robert Bernard with Stop the Foreclosure. I'm going to talk today about the fundamentals of foreclosure. So this is really like the second chapter of the book, Secrets to Keeping Your Home, Stop Foreclosure, and Get On With Your Life. And so my goal is to basically go through the book, talk about it, and give you a little more insight maybe, or a little different flavor on it. But the book is completely available on the website and the blogs. I'm sure you might have seen it by now at stoptheforeclosure.expert. It's not .com, it's .expert. And I will just start digging into it. So the fundamentals of foreclosure. I found this quote by Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. He says, foreclosure is giving debt relief to people that really need it. That's what foreclosure is. I'm not sure that's one way of looking at it or framing it. Honestly, foreclosure is about the bank recovering the property. If you don't make the payments, the bank will eventually default on the loan, and the bank will want to recover its money, so to speak, for what it lent out. And the asset of that loan or the mortgage is the property itself. And there are many different types of foreclosures. Let's start with that. Overall, there is the bank, the first mortgage, second mortgage, or third mortgage. Any of those mortgages could foreclose. Okay. It's very possible that a second mortgage could see that there's lots of equity in the property. Actually, I know one house that did that. The second mortgage was the one that foreclosed because there was a ton of equity in the house, even after paying the first mortgage off. And they saw it was in there, and they were actually had the bigger loan. The second mortgage, which means they were in second place to collect money, actually had a much bigger loan on the property than the first mortgage did. Even the third mortgage can foreclose. Like if there is still enough equity in the property and they can pay off the first two mortgages, the balances, they have got the right to foreclose. Let's put it this way. Rarely do third mortgages foreclose. The other one that's a little sneaky is actually HOAs, especially in Florida. If you don't pay your HOA's fees, the HOAs can actually come in and foreclose on the property. So that's a relatively new. Within the last 10 years or so, HOAs have started doing that. I guess it's not that new, but it was new at the time. It definitely was something that caught some homeowners off guard. And maybe some banks too. I think the banks didn't realize that the HOAs could foreclose in Florida because they weren't paying the HOAs dues until they realized such things. And then inside the foreclosure, this is actually really three different types of foreclosures. The main two are judicial foreclosures, where the bank has to go it has to file a lawsuit with the court. It typically will post a lis pendens. It'll file a lis pendens on public record attached to the property, which notifies that there is a lawsuit against the property for foreclosure. Okay. Judicial states include Florida, for example, where it takes typically 6 to 9 months for the average foreclosure to go through if there are no hiccups or delays. And the bank actually has to go to the court and say, look, they have to testify that the mortgage is late. It's been late for this many months. They've notified the homeowner. They've served the homeowner. And they're asking the court basically to set an auction date for the auction to happen. The other side of it is a non-judicial type of style of foreclosure where essentially, like in Georgia, for example, the bank hires a local attorney, a local firm. They will post in I think it's a legal organ is what it's called, but it's the newspaper where all the legal notices go in. They'll post there for approximately 4 weeks. And then the auction is held on the first Tuesday of the month at the courthouse. They literally stand there and call out the foreclosure notice. And that's called a non-judicial because there's no courts involved. The bank does not have to ever, or the bank or the servicer does not ever have to go to court to do that. They just file the newspaper notice and proceed on. So very fast in Georgia. I think they take a little more time now. And really, I should back up a little bit, is typically there's a notice of default that is issued first. That gives the homeowner a chance to get the note caught up, typically within 30 days. It's like, this is the amount outstanding typically, and you're in default, and the bank is saying, we're going to start foreclosure procedures. So the two main ones are judicial like Florida and non-judicial like Georgia. And then there's a third one where the bank just basically goes and takes the property over. And it was used in a few states, but typically it's really frowned upon. No state wants to give that much power to the bank where they can just come in and take over the property with no notice. So that really shouldn't happen anymore, but I know it was available at one point. And then I found out that in Oklahoma, the homeowner can actually request from the bank whether they want a judicial or non-judicial style of foreclosure. Just an interesting note, but typically it's 50-50. 50% of the states are judicial and 50% are not. There is a chart on one of the blogs on the website Stop the Foreclosure .expert, not .com, but .expert has a blog that has a list of kind of the states, what type of foreclosure it is, how long things are. There's also redemption periods. Like some states will actually let you go back and recover the house after the foreclosure. That's what a redemption is. Kansas has got a redemption period, but it varies actually. It varies by how much equity you have in the property when it was foreclosed upon. Just be aware that not all redemption periods are the same, even in a given state. And really, this goes back down to research. If I was in your shoes, what I would do is I would do as much research as I could to understand the process that is going to take place in my state. Okay. I mean, I can give you some generalities. Like Georgia is non-judicial state, will probably always be a non-judicial state. Florida is a judicial state, will always be a judicial state. Judicial typically takes longer than non-judicial. You can hire a lawyer to fight it and actually show up to the courthouse with a judicial foreclosure. And not all states have redemption periods. And there are different timelines for these as well. And just to do the research, I'm just going to list off some questions for you really to consider. Where you live, is it a judicial or non-judicial state? Okay. How long does the foreclosure stage process typically take place? From the beginning of the receiving the notice of default until the auction happens? What's the typical time frame? So you can just get yourself aware of that. Where do the banks publish the sale if required? It's not always required. Sometimes if it's a judicial state, the list pendants is what gets filed on public records is the notice, as well as the service of the lawsuit. Who holds the sale? Is it a trustee? Is it a deed of trust? Is it the sheriff? Is it an attorney? Is it online so that you can track it there? Where and when is the sale held? Is it online or in person? And here's the other thing is that I always recommend, even though this may be painful, is that you track how much the house sold for, okay? In regards to how much your mortgage is worth or how much you owe at the time of the foreclosure, because sometimes you could be entitled to a surplus, where you actually are entitled to money. That happens quite a bit, actually, especially in the HOA foreclosures. And then also deficiency judgments. So as a possible, you may have a deficiency judgment. And that's where the bank has the right to actually go after you for any deficiencies. So let's say that you owe $100,000 on your mortgage. They only sell the property for $80,000. You're technically legally responsible for that $20,000. Now, a lot of the banks don't go after that. You could be held, or you could have to pay IRS taxes on that potentially, because it's a debt forgiveness if they don't come after it. So just be aware of what's out there for you, okay? And then what are the timeframes for deficiency judgments? I cannot remember the state. I think it's Florida is one of the states where they can actually go ahead and it was like 10 years, the first 10 years, they could collect on the deficiency judgment. And if they wanted to, they could re-up that for another 20 years. And there were investors and people that had kind of done a strategic default on the property, let it go into foreclosure. And then almost 10 years later, they had another new rental property in Tennessee, and the banks discovered this, found out they had a ton of equity, and they actually went after the homeowners for the deficiency judgment years later on other properties. I don't know if it happens to homeowners typically, that just residential homeowners, but the bank was really interested in these people, and maybe it was because they were investors. And then, like I said, what's the redemption period? Oh, if there is a surplus, what's the process of getting the surplus? I shouldn't say don't. What I am going to say is that there are, like in Florida, private investigators do the research on who has the surpluses, and they'll knock on your door and say, hey, I found some money for you. If you want to split it with me, then I'll show you where it is. Well, here's the thing. If you know how much that property sold for and you know what you owed on that date, and you figure out there's a surplus, you don't need the PI to go get all that money, okay? You don't have to split that money with them necessarily. You can actually go and get it yourself. And sometimes, like, there are people that have money in in Florida that have been sitting there for 5 years and they have never touched it because they didn't know they had a surplus. Florida's pretty good about trying to find people, but I'm just saying that to just be aware of the surpluses because it actually happens more often than you think, especially when the housing market hasn't completely collapsed or hasn't been depressed yet. There's still some room for surpluses. So just be aware of that. And then sadly, but what is the eviction time frame and process? God forbid your house does get foreclosed upon. There's what's known as an eviction process where either the bank or the new owner will file with the sheriff's office and they will come, or the marshals, I guess it's the marshals, will come and evict people off the property and get it clear. Once again, another thing that you may want to know about just so that you can prepare your family for the time frames that are available and just no surprises. That's one of the things I can at least recommend is that not be surprised, know what the process is. My insider secret, since the book is called Secrets to Keeping Your Home. So my insider secret is if you take the time to research the kind of the items I talked about, it will provide you the information you need to make informed choices and give you some certainty about the foreclosure process so that you're not blindsided. Just to not really do some research, even if it's preliminary, find out what's there for you and go from there. If you'd like to set up a homeowner review, there are 13 different strategies you can take while in foreclosure as a homeowner. Some can be very beneficial to you. Some can, like head in the sand is one of them. So what we like to do is, if you'd like, we can set you up with a 30-minute phone call. It will actually be with me, Robert Bernard, at this time, maybe not forever, but if you're watching this when it first comes out, it'll be with me. And we'll look at your situation, what's going on with you. I refer to you all as the homeowner heroes because you're trying to stay in your house and fight for your house, or at least fight for your family. And the home is the most important thing. I can just tell you what I would do in your situation. Okay. I've got lots of experience. I've helped thousands of homeowners go through foreclosure. I'm happy to be of assistance and to just at least educate you on the 13 different strategies or what's available to you. And then you make the best decision for you and your family. All right. Look, just take care of yourselves, you all. Here at the Stop the Foreclosure family, we love you. We're thinking about you. We care about you. We know this is not an easy time for you. I've been through foreclosure myself. I know what this is like. All right, here is another episode complete, another chapter of the book done. And I'm just going to keep going through these until I've gone through the entire book. I leave your questions down below too. So if you got a question about the foreclosure process, if I wasn't clear, if I didn't mention anything, go ahead. And then if you want to read this chapter of the book, it is on the website at stoptheforeclosure.expert. And then it's one of the blogs. All right, till next time, take care.